Before we dive into the darkest corners of Reddit, before we explore stories that will make you question everything you thought you knew about reality, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button right now, because what you're about to hear, these aren't just stories. These are real experiences from real people who lived through something that fundamentally changed them. And if you want to keep experiencing content that goes beyond the surface, that digs into the uncomfortable truths lurking in our everyday lives, you need to be subscribed. Hit that like button too, because it tells me you're ready for this journey. Comment below if you've ever experienced something you couldn't explain, something that made your skin crawl. Now, let's begin. There's a particular feeling you get when reality starts to crack, when the world you thought you understood suddenly reveals itself to be something else entirely. It's not fear, exactly. It's deeper than that. It's the sensation of falling while standing perfectly still. And that's what these stories do. They make you fall while you're sitting in your chair, safe in your room, surrounded by everything familiar. But after you hear them, nothing feels quite as safe anymore. Let me tell you about a woman in California. She had beautiful hair, the kind she took care of meticulously. Every night before bed, she'd look in the mirror, brush it, style it perfectly. She lived with her boyfriend, slept in a separate room for quiet, and maintained a routine that never varied. Until one morning when she woke up and noticed something wrong. A chunk of her hair was missing. Not fallen out. Missing. Cut short. Clean. Deliberate. She told herself it was breakage, thin hair, tossing and turning at night. Maybe she damaged it somehow, but there was no hair on her pillow, none on her sheets, none on the floor. It had simply vanished. And then it happened again. A different section this time. Then again. Always at night. Always while she slept. Always disappearing completely. She checked her bed obsessively. She searched her room. Nothing. The hair wasn't just cut. It was gone, as if it had never existed at all. So she did what anyone would do. She told her boyfriend. And here's where it gets strange. He said nothing, just stared at her. For 3 full minutes, she explained what was happening, growing more frantic with each word. And when she finally asked if he thought it was weird, he simply said yeah, and changed the subject. Think about that for a moment. Someone you love tells you something terrifying is happening to them, something inexplicable, and your response is silence. What does that silence mean? Is it guilt? Is it something else entirely? She called a friend, showed him the missing chunks. The friend's immediate response was chilling. He thought it was the boyfriend. But she didn't want to believe that, couldn't believe that. So she decided to set up a camera to record herself sleeping, to catch whatever was happening in the act. But before she could do that, the comment section on Reddit exploded with a question that changed everything. Someone asked, "Do you have a carbon monoxide detector? Carbon monoxide poisoning causes memory loss, confusion, irrational behavior. It makes you do things you don't remember. Cut your own hair in the night and forget. Move objects and not recall. It turns you into a stranger to yourself." She hadn't considered that. She'd just moved into a new condo. She didn't know if there were detectors. But that still didn't explain the missing hair. If she'd cut it herself while poisoned by carbon monoxide, where did the hair go? Who cleaned it up? why would her boyfriend stay silent? The simple answer, the one everyone in the comments gravitated toward, was the most disturbing. He was cutting her hair while she slept. But why? What kind of person does that? What gratification comes from sneaking into someone's room night after night and taking pieces of them? Is it control? Obsession? Something darker we don't have words for? She never updated the thread again. We don't know if she installed the detector. We don't know if she set up the camera. We don't know if she's safe. And that silence, that absence of resolution, is its own kind of horror. Because somewhere out there, maybe she's still waking up with less hair than she had the night before. Maybe she's still trying to convince herself it's not him. Maybe she's learned the truth and can't bear to share it. Or maybe, and this is what keeps people up at night, maybe something else entirely is happening. Something we can't explain. Something that doesn't fit into our understanding of how the world works. The comments on her thread became increasingly desperate. People begged her to update. They wanted to know if she was safe. They shared their own theories. Some said it was definitely the boyfriend, that his silence was proof of guilt. Others insisted it was carbon monoxide poisoning, that she needed to get out of that condo immediately. A few suggested something supernatural, something beyond human understanding, but she never responded again. Her account went silent, and that silence is more terrifying than any answer could have been, because when someone stops talking about something this serious, it usually means one of two things. Either they found an answer so disturbing they can't bring themselves to share it, or something happened that prevents them from sharing anything at all. Both possibilities are nightmare fuel. Both keep you awake at night, wondering what became of her. Think about the psychology of someone who would do this. If it was the boyfriend, what drove him to it? Hair has significance in many cultures and belief systems. It's associated with power, with identity, with sexuality. Taking someone's hair without their knowledge is a violation on multiple levels. It's not just physical, it's psychological. It's claiming ownership over someone's body in a way that's deeply intimate and deeply wrong. And if it wasn't him, if it really was her, cutting her own hair while in some altered state, that's almost worse, because it means she couldn't trust her own mind, her own memories, her own perception of reality. It means the person she needed to fear was herself. And how do you protect yourself from yourself? The thread had thousands of comments by the time it went silent. People shared similar experiences. One woman said she'd wake up with unexplained bruises. Another said objects in her house would move overnight. A man claimed he'd set up cameras and caught himself sleepwalking, doing things he had no memory of. The common thread was the violation of safety in the place where you should feel most secure. Your own home, your own bed, your own body. This is what makes the story resonate so deeply. We all have that primal need to feel safe when we sleep. We're at our most vulnerable then, completely defenseless, trusting that the world will leave us alone for those few hours. When that trust is broken, whether by another person or by our own mind betraying us, it shakes something fundamental in our psyche. It makes us question everything. Before we continue, I want you to take a second and think about the people in your life. The ones you trust, the ones you sleep near, share space with, let into your most vulnerable moments. How well do you really know them? What happens when you close your eyes? Drop a comment below if this story unsettled you, if it made you look at your own life differently. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, because we're just getting started and it only gets worse from here. Let me tell you about obsession. Real obsession. The kind that transforms a person into something unrecognizable. A woman found pictures on her boyfriend's laptop. Hundreds of them. Thousands, maybe. All of the same person, her brother. Photographs taken from every angle, at every moment, in every location. Her brother walking to his car. Her brother at the grocery store. Her brother through windows. Her brother in the shower. That last one, the shower photo, that's when she knew this wasn't admiration or friendship gone too far. This was something else entirely. She confronted him, asked him why. Why her brother? Why so many pictures? Why the secrecy? And his response was calm. Too calm. He told her to stop crying, said she was overreacting, explained that he just thought her brother was interesting, that he liked taking pictures, that there was nothing wrong with it. Then he looked her in the eyes and told her to let it go. Just let it go. Move on. Forget she ever saw anything. That calmness is what makes it truly terrifying. A guilty person panics. They make excuses. They apologize. They try to explain it away with emotion. But someone who's calm, someone who genuinely doesn't see the problem, that's a person operating under a completely different set of rules. Rules we don't understand. Rules that don't include normal human boundaries, or empathy, or the basic understanding that stalking someone, documenting their life without consent, violating their privacy in the most intimate moments, is wrong. The comment section lit up immediately. People screaming at her through text to go to the police, to check her brother's house for more cameras, to understand that this wasn't going to stop. Because people like this don't stop. They escalate. Today, it's photographs. Tomorrow, it's something worse. And the worst part? She didn't want to go to the police, kept making excuses, kept trying to protect him or protect herself from the reality of what he was. Think about how many cameras could be in her brother's house. Think about how long this had been going on. Months? Years? How many intimate moments had been recorded and cataloged and watched over and over again? How many times had this man sat in front of his computer, scrolling through thousands of images of someone who had no idea they were being documented? And what was he planning to do with them? The woman took the laptop. That's good. That's evidence. But she never updated the thread again. Never told us if she went to the police, if she told her brother, if she got away from the boyfriend safely. And her brother, does he know? Does he lie awake at night wondering if he's still being watched? Has he found the cameras, or are they still there, still recording, still feeding footage to God knows where? This is what obsession looks like. It's not passionate and dramatic. It's methodical and patient and completely devoid of the guilt that would stop a normal person. It's a man spending hours, days, months collecting pieces of another person's life like they're trading cards. It's the systematic violation of privacy dressed up as interest. And the most chilling part is how easily it could happen to any of us. How easily someone in our lives could be doing the same thing right now. The details she shared painted a disturbing picture. The photos were organized into folders, dated, labeled. This wasn't random stalking. This was documentation, a project, The boyfriend had invested significant time and energy into this. He'd followed her brother to multiple locations, waited for opportunities, positioned himself to get the perfect shots. This required planning, dedication, a complete disregard for boundaries and consent. And the shower photo, let that sink in. He'd somehow gotten access to her brother's home or positioned a camera inside specifically to capture him in his most private moments. That's not just creepy, that's criminal. That's the kind of violation that destroys a person's sense of safety forever. Knowing that someone watched you when you thought you were alone, that they captured images of your naked body without consent, that those images exist somewhere out there in the world. The girlfriend's reluctance to go to the police is understandable on one level. It's hard to accept that someone you loved, someone you shared your life with, is capable of something like this. It creates cognitive dissonance. Your brain struggles to reconcile the person you thought you knew with the evidence of who they really are. So you make excuses, you minimize, you convince yourself there must be some explanation that makes it less terrible than it appears. But the commenters weren't having it. They understood what she couldn't yet accept, that this man was dangerous, that his calm reaction when confronted wasn't because he was innocent, but because he genuinely didn't see anything wrong with his behavior, and that makes him unpredictable. If he doesn't understand why stalking is wrong, what else doesn't he understand? What other boundaries might he cross? One commenter pointed out something chilling. The boyfriend had let them keep the laptop, didn't fight for it, didn't demand it back. Either he'd already backed up all the photos elsewhere, or he was confident they wouldn't actually do anything about it. Both possibilities are terrifying. The first means the evidence still exists. The brother is still at risk, and the stalking could continue. The second means he'd correctly assessed that the girlfriend's denial would protect him, that she'd choose him over her own brother's safety. Check your smoke detectors. Check your bathrooms. Check the little decorative items on your shelves. Because if you're interesting enough to someone, if they decide you're worth documenting, you'll never know until it's too late, or until someone accidentally opens the wrong laptop. That's what happened here. Pure chance. If she'd never looked at his computer, if she'd respected his privacy the way he clearly didn't respect her brother's, this would still be happening. He'd still be collecting photos. Her brother would still be oblivious. The violation would continue indefinitely. And that raises another question. How many people are being watched right now and don't know it? How many hidden cameras exist in homes, in public bathrooms, in changing rooms, capturing footage that's being collected by people we'd never suspect? Technology has made it easier than ever to surveil someone without their knowledge. Cameras are tiny. They can be hidden anywhere, and the people using them know how to avoid detection. The woman's brother was being stalked by someone he'd probably met, someone who had access to his life through his sister, someone he might have even liked or trusted. That's how these predators operate. They insert themselves into your world through legitimate connections, gain your trust, and then exploit it. And you never see it coming because they look normal. They act normal. They hide their true nature behind a mask of functionality. We're halfway through, and if you're still here, if you're still listening, I know what you're feeling. That uncomfortable itch, at the back of your mind. That urge to check the corners of your room. Good. That means you're paying attention. Hit that like button if these stories are getting to you. Subscribe if you want more content that doesn't shy away from the darkness. Comment below and tell me which story disturbed you more, the hair or the photographs. And let's continue, because there's so much more to uncover. Let me tell you about a man who destroyed his entire life in the space of a few weeks and documented every moment of his downfall on Reddit. It started with a simple post. He was asking for advice. His company had matched him with a mentor, a woman who'd been incredibly helpful with his career. They'd developed a professional relationship, met regularly for coffee to discuss work strategies. It was all completely appropriate, except he was married, and his wife had found out about these meetings. She was furious, accused him of having an emotional affair. He insisted it was just professional development, that nothing inappropriate had happened. The Reddit community was split. Some said his wife was overreacting, that professional relationships are important for career growth. Others said he should have been more transparent, should have introduced his wife to the mentor earlier. He took the advice. He'd back off, give his wife space, prove that there was nothing to worry about. Then came the update. He'd gone to one final meeting with the mentor to explain that he needed to step back. And during that meeting, in his words, something happened. He was vague about the details, but the implication was clear. They'd crossed a line. Maybe it was just a kiss. Maybe it was more. He didn't specify, but whatever it was, it changed everything. His wife found out. He swore it was a mistake, that it meant nothing, that he wanted to work on the marriage. She kicked him out of the house. He was living with a colleague, still trying to salvage the relationship, still insisting on Reddit that he'd made one mistake and deserved forgiveness. The comments turned against him. People pointed out the pattern, the escalation, the way he'd gone from innocent professional meetings to betrayal. He argued with them, defended himself, claimed he was taking responsibility, even as he made excuse after excuse. Then came the revelation that broke him. His company found out about his relationship with the mentor. Not just the final incident, but all of it. Every meeting, every coffee, every private message. And they had a problem with it, because the mentor wasn't supposed to be meeting with him at all. She'd violated company policy. They'd both violated company policy. And there were going to be consequences. He posted desperately, asking for advice on how to keep his job, explaining that he'd worked so hard to get where he was, that he couldn't lose everything over this. The comments were merciless. They told him he'd already lost everything, that he'd thrown away his marriage, his career, his reputation, for someone who apparently meant nothing to him, that he deserved what was coming. And then came the final update. His wife was filing for divorce. She was going to fight for full custody of their daughter. She'd lawyered up. His company was conducting an investigation. He might be fired. And the mentor? She disappeared. Stopped answering his messages, blocked him on everything, left him to face the consequences alone. What makes this story truly disturbing isn't the affair itself. Affairs happen. People make mistakes. It's the way he documented his own destruction, the way he kept posting, kept asking for sympathy, kept trying to rewrite the narrative, even as it became clear that he'd ruined his own life through a series of deliberate choices. He went from a man asking for advice on managing his wife's jealousy to a man facing divorce, job loss, and estrangement from his daughter. And through it all, he never really took responsibility. Not in the way that matters. He kept saying he understood what he'd done wrong, while simultaneously arguing that it wasn't that bad. Kept saying he'd accept the consequences while begging Reddit to tell him how to avoid them. Kept claiming he loved his wife while making it clear that he'd prioritized his own wants over her feelings at every turn. And in his final post, facing the complete collapse of everything he'd built, he still found a way to blame his wife for overreacting at the start. This is what self-destruction looks like in real time. A man handed every opportunity to stop, to turn back, to make the right choice, and choosing wrong at every turn. And the most unsettling part is how normal he seemed. He wasn't a monster. He was just a guy who thought the rules didn't really apply to him, that he could manage the situation, that everything would work out because he was fundamentally a good person who'd made a small mistake. Except it wasn't small, and he wasn't managing anything. He was just watching his life burn while holding the matches. The pattern in his posts was clear to everyone but him. He'd start each update claiming to take full responsibility. Then he'd spend paragraphs explaining why it wasn't really his fault. His wife was too jealous. The mentor came onto him. The company policy was unclear. His colleague, who he was staying with, didn't understand the full situation. Everyone was being too harsh. He'd made one mistake, and suddenly his whole life was falling apart. And that wasn't fair. But it wasn't one mistake. It was a series of choices. The choice to meet with the mentor privately without telling his wife. The choice to continue those meetings after his wife expressed discomfort. The choice to have that final meeting alone. The choice to cross whatever line they crossed during that meeting. The choice to lie about it. The choice to minimize it. The choice to keep making excuses instead of genuinely confronting what he'd done. And reading his posts, you could see the exact moment when each bridge burned. When his wife went from hurt to done. When his company went from concerned to actively investigating. When Reddit went from sympathetic to disgusted. He kept trying to pull back from each edge, but he'd already jumped. He just hadn't hit the ground yet. The comments on his final post were brutal but honest. People told him he deserved to lose custody, that his daughter was better off with a parent who could model healthy relationships and accountability. They told him he'd likely be fired and that he should have thought about that before violating company policy. They told him the mentor had used him and discarded him, that he'd been played, that he'd destroyed his family for someone who didn't even care enough to stand by him when things got difficult. And he argued with every single comment, insisted they didn't understand, said they were being too harsh, claimed he was being victimized by a system that didn't forgive mistakes. Never once did he say, "You're right, I destroyed my own life, and I have to live with that." Never once did he acknowledge that his wife and daughter were the real victims here, not him. He remained the hero of his own story, even as that story became a cautionary tale. We don't know what happened to him after that final post. Whether he lost his job, whether he lost custody, whether he found a way to rebuild. But we know that somewhere, a daughter is growing up knowing that her father chose his own ego over his family. That a wife is learning to trust again after being proven right about her worst fears, and that a man is living with the consequences of believing that what he wanted mattered more than what he'd promised. The truly disturbing part is how common this pattern is. How many people destroy their lives while insisting they're the victim? How many relationships end because someone couldn't accept accountability? How many children grow up in broken homes because a parent chose short-term gratification over long-term commitment? This man wasn't unique. He was just unusually public about his self-destruction. And that's what makes it so unsettling. Because if someone this ordinary, this normal, can rationalize away such obviously destructive behavior, what does that say about human nature? What does it say about our capacity for self-deception? What does it say about how we prioritize our own desires over the people we claim to love? You're still here. That means something. That means you're willing to face the uncomfortable truths, the stories that don't have happy endings or easy answers. Leave a comment if you've ever watched someone self-destruct, if you've tried to warn them and been ignored. Hit subscribe because there's more coming. More stories that reveal the ways people damage themselves and others. More proof that sometimes the monster isn't hiding in the dark. Sometimes it's making coffee every morning and posting on Reddit asking why everyone's being so mean. Let me tell you about a house. A beautiful house. The kind a family could never normally afford. It was tall, old, but well-maintained, nestled into evergreen woods. A steal, the mother called it. They'd been house hunting for 2 years and finally found something perfect. The father joked about how it was smelly gold, but gold nonetheless. The kids were excited. The older daughter finally getting her own room. The younger son thrilled about the space to play. It seemed like everything was finally coming together for this family. They moved in, started unpacking. The father and mother were busy organizing, the older daughter claiming the best room, the younger kids running through halls that echoed with their laughter. It was perfect. Too perfect, because perfection always has a price, and sometimes that price is steep. The older daughter, Ari, she was 17, old enough to notice things that seemed off. Small things at first, doors that wouldn't quite close right, cold spots in rooms that shouldn't be cold, sounds in the walls that the parents dismissed as old house settling. She didn't say anything at first, didn't want to ruin the family's happiness. They'd waited so long for this. But then things started happening that couldn't be dismissed. Her younger sister, Lena, started having nightmares, waking up screaming about the woman in her room, the woman who watched her sleep, the woman who smiled too wide. The parents said it was just adjustment anxiety, that moving to a new place was hard for kids. But Lena had never been afraid before, had never had nightmares like this, and she refused to sleep alone, demanded to go back to sharing a room with her brother. Ari started investigating, quietly without telling her parents. She looked up the house's history, previous owners, any incidents, and what she found made her blood run cold. The house had been empty for 3 years before they bought it, and before that, a family had lived there, a family of 4, a mother, a father, 2 children, and one night, something had happened, something violent, something the records didn't fully explain. The family had moved out in the middle of the night, left everything behind, furniture, clothes, photographs, just ran and never came back. Ari found more, Complaints from neighbors about sounds coming from the house during those 3 empty years. Sounds of footsteps, voices, crying. The police had investigated multiple times. Found nothing. No signs of squatters. No evidence of anyone living there. Just an empty house that somehow wasn't empty. She tried to tell her parents. They didn't want to hear it. They'd gotten such a good deal. They couldn't afford to move again. And nothing was actually wrong, right? Just some nightmares and creaky floorboards. Old houses make sounds. Kids have active imaginations. There was a rational explanation for everything. There had to be, but Ari knew better. She'd felt it the moment they arrived. That sense of being watched, of not being alone, of the house itself being aware of them. And now her sister was experiencing it too. Her brother would be next, and her parents, they'd keep denying it until something forced them to face the truth. Something that couldn't be explained away. What do you do when you realize your home isn't safe? When the place that's supposed to protect you becomes the source of fear? When you're too young to leave, but old enough to know something is fundamentally wrong? Ari was trapped. They all were. In a house that had been too good to be true. A house that wanted something from them. A house that had driven the last family out in the middle of the night. And the worst part? She knew her parents wouldn't believe her until it was too late. Until something happened that couldn't be ignored or rationalized. Until the house showed them what it really was. And by then, the damage would be done. By then, they'd all be changed, marked by whatever lived in those walls, in those rooms, in the spaces between the floorboards where things scratched and whispered in the dark. The things Lena described in her nightmares became more specific. The woman had long dark hair that covered her face. She wore a white dress that looked wet. She never moved, just stood there in the corner, watching, and she smiled. That smile was what terrified Lena most. A smile that was too wide, showing too many teeth, stretching her face in ways that faces shouldn't stretch. Ari started sleeping with her door locked, started keeping her phone charged and nearby, started researching the previous family, trying to find out what had driven them away. She found an old interview with a neighbor. The neighbor said they'd heard screaming that last night. Multiple voices, all terrified, and then silence. The family's car had peeled out of the driveway at 3 a.m. They never came back, not even to collect their belongings. The house had been foreclosed on, sat empty for 3 years. Several families had looked at it, but none had bought it until Ari's family came along. And now Ari understood why. The house wanted them to buy it, had hidden its true nature during the viewings, during the inspection, during all the times her parents had visited before signing the papers. It had been waiting, patient, and now it had them. Ari tried to document what was happening, set up her phone to record her sister's room at night. But every morning, the recording would be corrupted, just static and strange sounds that hurt to listen to. She tried researching the land the house was built on, found nothing conclusive, just vague references to the area being historically significant to local tribes, something about it being a boundary place, a place between. Her brother started having nightmares too, about a man this time, a tall man with no face who stood at the foot of his bed. The man never moved, never made sound, just stood there watching him sleep. And when the boy would scream, would call for his parents, they'd come running and find nothing. The room would be empty, and they'd comfort him, tell him it was just a bad dream, that he was safe. But he wasn't safe. None of them were safe. Ari could feel the house changing around them. It had been patient at first, subtle. But now that it had them, now that they'd fully moved in and couldn't easily leave, it was showing itself. The sounds in the walls grew louder. The cold spots became freezing. Things would move on their own. Doors would lock from the inside. And through it all, her parents insisted everything was fine. Ari began to realize something horrifying. The house didn't want to drive them out. The previous family had escaped, had broken free. But this time, the house had learned. This time, it was being smarter. It was targeting the children, knowing the parents would dismiss their fears as imagination. It was creating a situation where the family would be divided, where the parents' rational minds would prevent them from seeing the truth until it was too late to leave. And what would happen then? What did the house want? Ari didn't know, but she knew that every night they stayed, the house's grip on them grew stronger, that whatever had driven the last family out in the middle of the night, screaming in terror, was still here, still waiting, still watching them from behind walls and in mirrors and in the dark spaces under beds. The post ended there. Ari never updated. We don't know what happened to that family. If they're still in that house, if they got out, if they survived whatever the house had planned for them. But somewhere, there's a tall, old house nestled in evergreen woods. And maybe it's empty again. Maybe it's waiting. Maybe it's already found a new family. A new family looking for a good deal, willing to overlook the price that's too good to be true. This is why we're here. This is why you're listening. Because these stories, they're not just entertainment. They're warnings. They're proof that sometimes the monsters are real. Sometimes the bad feelings we get are right. Sometimes we should trust our instincts and run, even when everyone else is telling us we're overreacting. Comment below if you've ever felt like something was wrong in a place but couldn't explain why. Hit that like button if this story gave you chills. And subscribe because we're almost at the end, and I have one more story to share. One more piece of proof that the world is stranger and darker than we want to believe. Let me tell you about a man named Carl. He seemed like a regular guy, active on Reddit, helpful in the community, offering advice and support to people who needed it. He'd built a reputation as someone trustworthy, someone who genuinely wanted to help others succeed. He'd spend hours answering questions, offering guidance, sharing his expertise. He became something of a fixture in certain subreddits, someone people would specifically seek out for advice. And then one day, he posted asking for help himself. He had a problem, a serious problem that was ruining his life. 5 years earlier, he'd done business with someone who turned on him. This person posted a false report online, claiming Carl had stolen money from them. It wasn't true. Carl swore it wasn't true. But the report was the first result when you searched his name on Google, and it had destroyed him. Clients stopped working with him. His business collapsed. He lost everything. His company, his reputation, his financial stability. All because of one lie that he couldn't get removed. The website that hosted the report refused to take it down. They said they couldn't verify whether it was true or false. so they'd leave it up. Carl was devastated. For 5 years, every job interview, every business meeting, every new relationship started with people Googling his name and finding this accusation. He was desperate, asking Reddit for help pushing down the search results, for advice on how to rebuild his reputation, for any solution that would let him move on with his life. He explained that he'd consulted lawyers, but they said it would cost tens of thousands of dollars with little chance of success. He couldn't afford that. He was already financially ruined. All he wanted was for people to help him create positive content about his name so that the false report would get buried in search results. The community rallied around him. They felt sorry for this man who'd been wronged, who was suffering for something he didn't do. They started creating blog posts, forum threads, social media profiles, all using his name in positive contexts. They devoted time and energy to helping a stranger, because that's what communities do. They help, and Carl had been helping them for years. Now it was their turn to return the favor. Days turned into weeks. People were making real progress. The negative report was dropping in search rankings. Positive results were appearing. Carl was grateful, posting updates thanking everyone, explaining how much this meant to him, how they were literally saving his life. The community felt good about what they were doing. They were fighting injustice. They were helping someone who deserved it. And then someone started digging. Someone got curious about the details of Carl's story, started asking questions that Carl had been vague about. Who exactly was this person who'd posted the false report? What was the business relationship? Could Carl provide more documentation? And the more questions they asked, the more holes appeared in Carl's story. Someone found the original report, read it carefully, started cross-referencing the claims with Carl's own posts on Reddit over the years. And things didn't add up. Details Carl had mentioned in passing contradicted his version of events. Dates didn't match. Names were inconsistent. And when people started looking deeper, they found other reports. Other people claiming Carl had scammed them. Other victims with similar stories. The truth came out slowly. Then all at once, Carl hadn't been wrongly accused. He'd been accurately accused, multiple times, by multiple people. He really had scammed people, had taken their money, had violated their trust. The report that was ruining his life wasn't false. It was one of the few honest warnings about him available online, and his presence on Reddit, his years of being helpful and trustworthy, that had all been part of a long-term strategy. He'd been building social capital, creating a reputation as someone good and helpful, so that when he eventually needed the community's help to suppress the truth about his past, they'd believe him. They'd rally to his defense. They'd do the work of burying evidence of his crimes. It had worked. For a while, the community had been manipulated into helping someone erase evidence of their wrongdoing. They'd been used as tools in a calculated reputation management campaign. And when they realized what they'd done, the backlash was immediate and brutal. Carl went from being a beloved community member to the most hated person on Reddit. But here's the truly disturbing part. How many other Carls are out there? How many people are playing the long game, building trust and goodwill so they can cash it in later? How many sob stories are carefully constructed lies? How many times have we been manipulated without ever realizing it? How many people in our lives right now are not who they seem, are building relationships for ulterior motives, are waiting for the right moment to use us. Carl's strategy was brilliant in its patience. He didn't rush. He spent years being genuinely helpful, answering hundreds of questions, building real relationships. He knew that if you help enough people, when you eventually ask for help yourself, they'll give it without question. He understood human psychology. We want to believe that people are good. We want to trust. And we especially want to trust people who've been kind to us. The Reddit community tore apart everything Carl had ever posted. They found patterns of manipulation, times when he'd helped people specifically so he could reference it later, relationships he'd cultivated with influential members of various communities. It was all calculated, all strategic. Years of careful positioning for this one moment when he'd need the community to suppress the truth about who he really was. And it had almost worked. If that one person hadn't gotten curious, hadn't started asking questions, Carl would have successfully buried his past. The negative reports would have disappeared from search results. He could have started fresh, found new victims, continued his pattern of manipulation and fraud. The community had almost enabled that. They'd almost helped a predator cover his tracks. The aftermath was ugly. People felt betrayed, used, stupid for not seeing through the deception. Some deleted their accounts out of shame. Others became paranoid, questioning every sob story, every request for help. The community's willingness to help strangers took a hit. And that's perhaps the saddest part. Carl hadn't just manipulated individuals. He'd poisoned the well. He'd made it harder for people with genuine problems to get help because now everyone was suspicious. We don't know what happened to Carl after Reddit turned against him. His account went silent. He probably created new accounts, new identities, started the process over in different communities. People like him don't stop. They just adapt. They learn from their mistakes and get better at manipulation. They find new targets, new ways to exploit trust. And that's the lesson here, that someone can be kind and helpful and engaging for years while secretly being something else entirely. That trust is a weapon in the right hands. That the most dangerous manipulators are the ones who are patient enough to wait, to build, to make you believe in them before they ask you to compromise yourself. That the person who's been helping you, who you'd vouch for without hesitation, might be doing it all for reasons you can't see yet. This is what we're up against in online communities, in real life, in every interaction where we don't have complete information about someone's motives. We want to believe people are good. We want to trust. We want to help. And people like Carl exploit that goodness, that trust, that willingness to help. They turn our best qualities against us. Carl's story is a reminder that people aren't always who they seem. That someone can be kind and helpful for years while secretly being something else entirely. That trust is earned but can be manufactured. That patience is a virtue, but it can also be a weapon. That the most successful manipulators are the ones who play the long game, who understand that the best way to get what you want is to first become someone people want to help. Think about the people in your online communities, the ones who are always helpful, always available, always kind. How well do you really know them? What are their motives? Are they genuine? Or are they building social capital for some future manipulation? It's an uncomfortable question, because it forces us to be suspicious of kindness. But sometimes suspicion is warranted. Sometimes the person helping you has an agenda. This is the final lesson, the one that ties all these stories together. The world is not safe. People are not always who they seem. The things that happen to us, the violations and the betrayals and the unexplainable horrors, they're all around us all the time. We just don't see them until they happen to us. Until we're the ones posting on Reddit asking for help. Until we're the ones trying to convince strangers that yes, this is really happening. Yes, you should be concerned. The woman whose hair was cut while she slept. The brother who was stalked with cameras. The man who destroyed his family for an affair. The family trapped in a house that watches them. Carl, who spent years building trust to manipulate an entire community. These stories are different in their details, but they share a common thread. They're all about violations of trust, about the moment when we realize the world isn't what we thought it was, about discovering that safety is an illusion we maintain until reality shatters it. So what do we do with this knowledge? How do we live in a world where someone might be cutting our hair while we sleep, stalking our loved ones with cameras, destroying our lives with deliberate patience? We pay attention. We trust our instincts. We don't ignore the red flags. We don't explain away the things that don't make sense. And we remember that sometimes the worst thing we can do is give someone the benefit of the doubt. Because doubt is healthy. Doubt is what keeps us safe. Doubt is what makes us look at that too good to be true house and say, no, something's wrong here. Doubt is what makes us check our partner's computer when things don't add up. Doubt is what makes us question whether someone's sob story is real before we invest our time and energy into helping them. Doubt gets a bad reputation, but doubt is often the only thing standing between us and becoming another cautionary tale on Reddit. These stories stay with us because they're true, because they happen to real people who are still out there, still dealing with the aftermath, still wondering what they could have done differently, still looking over their shoulders, still checking the corners of their rooms before they sleep. The woman with the missing hair, if she's still alive, probably has trust issues now, probably struggles to sleep, probably double checks every lock, every door, every window, probably wonders every single day whether it was him or whether something else entirely is still out there, still watching, still waiting. The brother who was stalked, if he ever found out about it, probably tears his house apart looking for cameras, probably feels violated in ways he can't articulate, probably has trouble with intimate relationships now, knowing that someone watched him in his most private moments and collected those images like trophies, probably wonders what else that person has, what other footage exists, whether it's been shared or sold or posted somewhere online where it will live forever. The man who destroyed his marriage, he's living with consequences that will follow him for decades. His daughter will grow up with a complicated relationship with him at best, absent at worst. His ex-wife has to explain to that daughter why daddy doesn't live with them anymore. His career is probably ruined. His reputation is definitely destroyed. And somewhere in his mind, he's probably still trying to convince himself it wasn't his fault, still trying to rewrite the narrative, still trying to be the hero of a story, where he's very clearly the villain. The family in the house, if they're still there, are probably dealing with psychological trauma that will affect them for life. The children, especially. Imagine growing up in a place where you're constantly afraid, where your parents don't believe you, where something malevolent watches you every night. That shapes a person. That creates lasting damage. Even if they eventually escape, even if they get to safety, those experiences will follow them. They'll have trouble sleeping in new places. They'll be hyper-aware of every sound, every shadow. They'll carry that fear forever. And the people Carl manipulated, they're probably more cynical now, less willing to trust, less likely to help strangers online. They've learned that kindness can be exploited, that trust can be weaponized, that the person who seems most genuine might be the most dangerous. That's a hard lesson. It makes the world feel colder, more hostile, more dangerous. And they're right to feel that way, because the world is all those things. If you made it to the end of this, thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being willing to sit with these uncomfortable truths. Thank you for not looking away from the darkness, for acknowledging that it exists, for understanding that these aren't just stories, but warnings about the world we live in. Hit that subscribe button one final time if you haven't already, because there are more stories out there, more warnings disguised as entertainment, more proof that the monsters are real and they're closer than you think. Leave a comment sharing your own experience, your own brush with something that still doesn't make sense. Share your story of betrayal or violation or unexplained phenomena, because these conversations matter, because knowing we're not alone in our experiences matters, because creating a community that acknowledges the darkness while supporting each other through it matters. And hit that like button to let me know this resonated with you, that it meant something, that you understand why these stories need to be told. These stories stay with us because they're true, because they happen to real people who thought they were safe until they weren't, because they remind us that safety is conditional, that trust must be earned and verified, that the world contains more darkness than we usually acknowledge, and because they force us to confront uncomfortable questions about the people in our lives, the places we call home, the reality we think we understand. The woman with the missing hair taught us that the people we sleep next to might not be who we think they are, that our homes aren't always safe, that the most intimate violations can happen while we're completely unaware, that sometimes the people we love are capable of things we can't imagine. That trust in a relationship is fragile and once broken, almost impossible to fully restore. The stalker with the photo collection taught us that obsession looks normal from the outside, that predators don't announce themselves, that someone can violate us systematically over months or years without us knowing, that privacy is increasingly difficult to maintain, that the people with access to our lives might abuse that access in ways we never consider, that sometimes the person sleeping next to your sister has been stalking you the entire time. The man who destroyed his family taught us that self-deception is powerful, that people can rationalize almost anything, that some people will burn down their entire lives while insisting they're not holding the matches. That accountability is rare, that some people would rather lose everything than admit they were wrong, that the damage one person can do while refusing to acknowledge their own culpability, is immense and lasting. The haunted house taught us that sometimes places have histories that matter, that sometimes the good deal is too good to be true, that sometimes children see things adults have trained themselves not to see. That denial is a powerful force, that by the time we accept that something is fundamentally wrong, it might be too late to escape, that some places want things from us, and we don't understand what until we've already given it. And Carl taught us that trust is a currency that can be manufactured and exploited, that patience is not always a virtue, that people can play long games with our emotions and goodwill, that the person who helps you today might be doing it to use you tomorrow, that communities can be manipulated, that truth is increasingly difficult to verify, that the person with the best reputation might be the most dangerous. These lessons are uncomfortable. They make the world feel less safe. They make us more suspicious, more guarded, more afraid. And maybe that's not entirely bad. Maybe a little fear is healthy. Maybe a little suspicion keeps us safe. Maybe questioning things that don't make sense is exactly what we should be doing. Maybe the real danger is being too trusting, too willing to overlook red flags, too invested in believing that people are fundamentally good. Because while most people are good, some aren't. And those who aren't often know how to pretend they are. They know what to say, how to act, what behaviors will earn trust. They study normal people and mimic them. They learn to blend in, and they wait patiently for the right opportunity, for the moment when they can act on their true nature without immediate consequences. This is the world we live in, a world where hair gets cut in the night, where photos get collected in secret, where lives get destroyed through calculated selfishness, where houses trap families, where trust gets exploited systematically. And acknowledging that isn't pessimism, it's realism. It's accepting the full spectrum of human behavior, not just the comfortable parts. It's understanding that for every story of kindness and generosity, there's a story of violation and betrayal, and both are true. Both exist simultaneously. Both are part of the same world. So we move forward with that knowledge. We love people, but verify their actions. We trust, but maintain boundaries. We help others, but protect ourselves. We build communities, but stay alert for manipulation. We create safety where we can, but acknowledge it's never absolute. We tell these stories not to spread fear, but to spread awareness. Because awareness is protection. Knowledge is power. Understanding that these things happen is the first step in preventing them from happening to us. And now, maybe, so will you. Sweet dreams.